New England chapter of JDRF, we'd like to thank you all for coming. You can't hear me, Keith? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm going to lean into it. So thank you for coming. Really appreciate it. It's a little bit bittersweet. It's great to see everybody in the room and here learning about type 1 diabetes and where we're going with cures, prevent, and treatment. It's a little bit bitter to have to see so many people in this room, but hopefully with more and more people that come, the less and less people that will have to come. So let's keep moving forward. My name's Dean Maines. I sit on the board of the New England chapter of JDRF. My connection to type 1 diabetes is my son, Trevor. He was diagnosed when he was 4. He's now 9, and so we've spent a lot of time and energy trying to raise funds and trying to make life a little bit better for Trevor, probably much like the rest of you. And so we inch forward every day, and hopefully we'll get there soon. We're very excited to have you all here tonight. We're going to give you a nice overview of JDRF's research portfolio. We have Tom Brobson here tonight, who's going to speak. I was speaking to Tom beforehand. He was asking me not to go through his bio, which Amy very diligently wrote up for me, so I'm not going to do that, Tom. I am just going to mention, though, that you are the National Director for Research Investment Opportunities at JDRF. That's it. That's as far as I'm going to go. What he did ask me to say, though, he's the guy that does a lot of interesting things at JDRF. So we're very pleased to have him here tonight. We're looking forward to your speech. So, Tom, please take it over.
So first thing I have to say is thank you, Dean, and he's going to adjust that sound probably. I can move the mic down if you want me to. Yeah. Okay. So no, I really appreciate Dean doing that because, I don't know, it's just embarrassing to me to hear my bio read out loud when you're sitting there. So I guess the humility part of me likes to just sort of get on with this. So my name's Tom Brobson, and it's a pleasure to get to be here. I've spent the day meeting with a lot of folks. Kelly Toronto, my colleague, is somewhere, there she is over there. And Kelly's kept me very busy today doing lots of good things. And it's just a pleasure to get to be here and sort of share a lot of things. I'm going to take us through a slide deck. And I will tell you straight up that I believe in death by PowerPoint. I'm not, I really, if Abraham Lincoln had used the PowerPoint at the Gettysburg Address, I'm pretty sure it wouldn't have been nearly as impactful. So I will use the deck because it will show some things that are kind of interesting, but I would much rather have a conversation with you guys. So if you have questions that you're burning a hole in your pocket, please raise your hand and ask the question. Because I'd much rather go where you guys are interested in, and yes, I will try to drive home some key points about sort of what JDRF is and where we're going, much of which you may know, but it's trying to just reinforce these key things and give you some updates on various elements of our research portfolio. I'm only going to be able to touch on some very top-level highlight kinds of things, but one of the scary pieces is I have a lot of crazy stuff stored in my head, so sometimes you ask questions and I can come up with amazing answers. And other times I can't, in which case I will turn to my colleague Peter Lomedico, who's somewhere in the room. Peter, where are you? You have to raise your hand. Oh, there he is over on the far right. So Peter is another individual with whom I get to spend time, and Peter works closely in our research department. So he's one of those incredibly brilliant people that I'm always happy that are willing to dedicate their life to our problem of type 1 diabetes. And really and truly, when you see me standing up here talking about a lot of things I'm going to talk about, what I'm really representing is some amazing people all around the globe, both our academic partners and our industry partners, and our academic, our PhD, MD type folks that administer JDRF's giant research portfolio, who are really the ones who are deriving so much of what we're doing. And it's an incredibly robust and incredibly complex picture that I'm going to try to briefly give you a sense of. So before I get into any of that, though, I want to say I love questions. I do not have any initials after my last name, no PhD, no MD, but I am T1D. I do have type 1 diabetes. So that may be the ultimate best qualification at this very moment. We'll see. Before I get started, any questions? Oh, and I also will tell you I'm from Virginia, so occasionally I will say y'all or all y'all, and you'll just have to chuckle lightly and appreciate that. So I'll try not to do that. Earlier today, we were talking with someone. We've had a couple of interesting conversations today, and it came up about JDRF and its marketing and how it communicates what it is and what it does. And many of you who've been around JDRF for a long time, I know there's probably someone in the room, I'm just not seeing her right now, whose father's been involved with JDRF since the very beginning. And you know, JDRF doesn't often tell its story very well. This is not something that JDRF has ever been willing to spend resources on, frankly. Charlie Keenan is in the room. Charlie is on our international board. And he'll tell you that whenever the conversation came up of, okay, should we spend a little extra money on marketing and communications and try to get messages out about who we are and what we do, there was a general discussion that said, no, if we have extra money, we should drive it towards the research, towards the therapies and the cures. This is our efficiency, this is what we're about, this is the promise we've made, and what we're trying to deliver to our constituencies. And you're going to hear about that in spades here in a minute. But the good news is, through the hard work of volunteers and JDRF staff, we've been actually able to also get better at telling some of that story. So I just decided that it would be useful to, I'm going to lead off with a video, and I'm going to close with a video tonight. These are new. If you didn't know it, JDRF now has a channel on YouTube, which I think is pretty amazing. And while most of us may not care, the whole next generation of digital kids, they care. And having that digital presence really matters. So these videos are all up there. They're also running as PSAs around the country. And I just think they help to sort of start setting a tone, but they also let me drive home that, don't worry, JDRF is trying to pay attention to some of these things.
We're the stronger than we look type. The braver than you think type. The type that sees the odds and says, they're meant to be overcome. We're the progress is inevitable type. The rise to every challenge type. The type that knows bit by bit, the future is certain to get better. We're the plan for a cure type. The improved life along the way type. The type that will stop at nothing. Absolutely nothing, until type 1 becomes type none.
So, just some simple things that I wanted to kind of lead off with just to help drive home a couple of interesting points. And also, it really helps me introduce some core themes that you're going to really start to hear hopefully through this talk. And that really speaks to a lot of what JDRF is doing. The plan for the future type, the world without type 1 diabetes, the type 1 to type none. I was actually at the University of Utah last week, and there was a researcher who said, I'll sell you an N. And I thought that was pretty good. So, just some really core themes. Active, engaged people, engaged in creating a future world without type 1 diabetes, active, engaged people changing the world, which is fundamentally what all of us are. We are JDRF, all of us are JDRF. And we have really set ourselves a really impressive task. I have had the good fortune of meeting and spending time with a number of our founding individuals, the mothers and fathers who helped to get JDRF started. One of them was a woman named Carol Lurie. She's one of my favorite people. Sadly, she passed away about a year ago. And you know, I was one time talking to her and I said, Carol, thank you for having gotten things started back in 1970, because if you hadn't gotten started in 1970, we would have to be discovering all this stuff now. Right? What we didn't know in 1970 was astonishing. We didn't realize there was type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. It was just all diabetes. Right? It was known that there was an acute version that started in children, and there was another kind that seemed to come on later in adults, and that they didn't really have to immediately go on insulin like those kids did. If the kids weren't on insulin right away, they died. So when she founded this organization, that was all just one giant mess. It wasn't understood that it was an autoimmune disease that was regulated by or immune-mediated in all the realities of beta cells and immune attacks. Now we talk about type 1, type 2, and T cells and regulatory cells like it's no big deal. All of that was unknown at the time. And so I said to Carol, thank you for having gotten things started. And she looked at me and she said, if we had known how much we didn't know, I'm not sure we would have been brave enough to get started. Right? So I just think sometimes it's really important to have a sense of where we've been and where we are and where we're going, and that part of what we are really setting out to do is to change the world. And so that's a great way to introduce my first slide, which is really fundamentally what is JDRF all about. You will quickly learn that I like big images. I'm an image guy. not big on words in PowerPoint. So JDRF, so vision is the simple thing, right? Vision is saying JFK standing and saying, we will have a man on the moon by 1969. We will put an American on the moon by the end of this decade. And all the engineers around the country, and I knew plenty of them, going, oh my God, we have no idea how to do that. Right? Vision statements are the big things. We are going to create a world without type 1 diabetes. It's a powerful thing. It's what drives everything that you're about. And this is what we are about, is creating a world without type 1 diabetes. The nitty-gritty of how you get there, that's a lot of hard work. And that's what we've been at for the last 30 plus years. And it's what we're going to have to be at for a lot more years. But I'm going to hopefully give you a big sense about a lot of interesting things going on there. All this making sense? Any questions? I know Kelly will tell me this is New England and people don't raise their hands, but you can raise your hand. I'll tell you, the Lutherans in Madison, Wisconsin can beat all of you. Nobody would sit in the front row, they all sat in the back. So you can ask questions, trust me. So, creating a world without type 1 diabetes. How do you get to that vision, right? That really then goes to a plan, right? That you have to have a plan that you're executing against, a business plan. If you really want to know and understand JDRF, you have to appreciate that we are fundamentally driven by business plans. We have comprehensive strategies for how we're going to move a number of things down the field, how we're going to achieve specific deliverables and outcomes. So less until none is one way of trying to characterize some of that. The pointer works. So less until none. And what do we mean by less until none? So we want to get to a world without type 1 diabetes, but one way of our getting there is we want to drive less until none. It means we want to see less of a burden of type 1 diabetes in people's lives, right? So as we're on this pathway getting to the cure, we want to be improving quality of life. We want to make type 1 less burdensome. We want to see type 1 become less invasive. I'm standing up here right now in front of you, and I have a lot of stuff attached to my body, a lot of stuff. And I promise I'm going to probably start to show it to you all here in a little bit, right? So we want a lot less burden. Yeah, it's really fun going through TSA at the airports when you've got lots of stuff attached to your body. I can tell you some interesting stories. So less burdensome, less invasive, less complex, right? Less dangerous. We all know the dangers of type 1 diabetes. So less until none. We want to be able to see therapies that move across sort of a continuum of activity, and I'm pushing the wrong button, towards the cure, right? So we're on this path to creating a world without type 1 diabetes, what we would all call cure. But if I asked every single person in this room what cure was, we would end up with probably 40 or 50 different definitions of what the cure ultimately is. Where you are in life can really influence what you think the cure is going to be. I was with a gentleman who's in his 90s, he's been living with type 1, he's one of the first people to ever receive insulin, and he's still alive, lives in Syracuse, New York. His definition of cure was way different than a person who was just diagnosed a year ago, right? And yet JDRF, we, all of us, what we've undertaken to do, what Carol Lurie helped to start back in 1970, is to fix it for all of us, for the person who's been living with it for 70 years, as well as the person who's been living with it for 1 year, as well as the person who's 7 years away from being diagnosed and doesn't know it, right? They're walking around with a target on their back. And that's what we have all undertaken to do. And we want to drive things from things that improve our quality of life, therapies that slowly over time move us towards this place, right? And in conjunction with that, we see this, again, less until none idea. Fewer side effects, complications, reducing patient burden, and ever-improving glucose control, safety, normal physiology, fully restored, right? So pretty simple stuff, pretty straightforward. Just giving you big picture stuff here. And all of this then goes type 1 to type none. And really, I will buy an N from anybody who's got it, who can put this piece together. Any questions? Keep checking with you guys. Someone will have a question. But now let's drill down a little bit deeper, right? So I've started big and I'm slowly moving down. I'm going to get super concrete with you guys. But big picture, we're talking about a world without type 1 diabetes. Less until none is one way of characterizing this. We want to improve quality of life while we're driving therapies that ultimately lead to cures. And there's, again, this is an incredibly complex global undertaking, and I'm about to try to synthesize this down into 20 or 30 minutes with you guys. So a little bit more detail, you got to have a plan, and that plan really is the therapeutic development pipeline. And then many people who've worked in this space have seen this before. There's lots of different graphics. When I was at University of Utah, they were all like, wow, that's the best pipeline graphic we've ever seen. And I told them that our CEO would be very, very happy to hear that, because we worked hard to come up with a good graphic. But so what does the pipeline really mean, right? So at the front end of this pipeline, where we start to feed things into it, this is basic discovery research. This is what Carol Lurie started back in 1970. Let's find some of the brightest people in the world to start answering very basic questions about what the heck is this thing, diabetes, that our child is living with, right? They're asking those fundamental questions that have led us to now understand that there's type 1 and there's type 2. There's autoimmune and there's sort of the metabolic insulin resistance-driven diabetes. You know, that T regulatory cells, so immune cells that are regulatory as well as attack cells are involved, and that we can start to regulate them, right? Understanding the biology of beta cells, these incredibly, nature's original glucose sensors are beta cells. And yet, back in 1970, nobody knew much about them, and in fact, even 10 years ago, there was a lot we don't know about them, and I'm going to touch back on that here in a little bit later. So JDRF has been asking those basic questions, finding amazing answers, and sort of rewriting textbooks on a regular basis. So that's this very initial stage. The next stage is really then starting to drive, and this is very simplified when I say stage by stage, there's lots that comes in between all these, but driving things from basic discovery research then into clinical development. Clinical development means you're now putting this into human beings. So my favorite way of doing this, and you know, it is my favorite way of doing this, and I'm not beating up on mice, but so how many people have read about mice that have been cured of type 1 diabetes, right? And how many people are tired of reading about healthy mice? Right? So I'm all about healthy people, not healthy rodents. So what it really means is this is great, but we have to, whoops, that just jumped it forward the wrong way. So what we really want to do, though, is take the stuff here, these discoveries that have been done in animals, and move them into human beings. And I'm going to give you, again, some really concrete examples of what this looks like in human beings. If you really want to understand where JDRF is today, and where we've been, where we are, and where we're going, where we are today is increasingly in these next segments here, driving the things that have been discovered into application in human beings. It's no good to us if it only works in mice, or rats, or cats, or dogs. We need to see it working in people, and it needs to become available to patients. So that also means that we need to be working in the regulatory environment. So we're working with the FDA in the United States or other regulatory agencies in other countries to understand what the path forward looks like, right? We need to know that we're doing things safely. So that's the regulatory environment. That's part of what they do. But we also need to understand what that regulatory horizon looks like so that companies are willing to step up and drive the commercialization, because as we all know, it's companies that bring us new products. Right? I love my alma mater. It's Virginia Tech. I'm a Hokie. But Virginia Tech doesn't have factories and build new products and drive them to market and get them to my doctor who can prescribe them to me and teach me how to use them, right? That's what companies do. So JDRF is actively involved throughout this now in both partnering with industry and working with the FDA regulatory environment to make sure that our companies understand what the playing field looks like so they know that they can be successful in bringing their new therapies and products to market. Make sense? Mm-hmm. Again, I have concrete examples I'm going to go to. And then reimbursement, right? And fortunately, with the Affordable Health Care Act, I think things are changing rapidly in this environment. But if people can't get access to this, if new things come and we can't afford them or get to them, then we haven't succeeded. Because really, the ultimate definition of success from JDRF, again, what Carol Lurie originally started, is this: delivery to the patient. Things have to reach those of us living with type 1 diabetes if we're going to get this less until none reality. Again, any questions? This is all basic stuff. I'm just setting up some things with these slides.